Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
Damn, that was good. I like that. You know, yeah. My name is Paul Williams. I'm a very grateful recovering alcoholic. Sober today by the grace of God. The principles of this program, the fact is there's a lot of people you'll find in this program that'll get on buses, planes, trains, will show up. I mean, I spoke last Saturday in North Dakota. I don't know if anybody in North Dakota is going to hear this, but I like Myrtle Beach better. In the interest of rigorous honesty, I want you to know I like Myrtle Beach a lot better. You know, there were some fabulous people in North Dakota. I had a wonderful time there. My sobriety date is March 15th, 1990. My sponsor's name is Mac M. I'm living comfortably in 10, 11, and 12. I have a home group. My home group is Lucky 13, having nothing to do with an imaginary step, but with a street called 13th Street, now called Broadway at Sunset Beach, California. And I've been sober 23 years, and they've been the most amazing years of my life. I want to, you know, there is a chance, you know, I used to be sort of famous, so there's something that I want to say that this is being recorded tonight, you know, and you never know when some reporter with a real enthusiasm for what she's doing and can't think of anything else to write about may decide that, hey, I heard that Little Enos from Smokey and the Bandit got sober. Let's maybe write a story about that, and you know. So I want to talk to the reporter that's sitting there with this CD in her player and deciding she's going to do a great favor to all of us. I want to ask you to do something for me and for Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm very open about my recovery. I speak at a public level now and then about recovery, but there's one, and I love it, as you pointed out. You know, my story is one of my favorite things. You know, it's like, wow, it's a fantastic. Today I did not have a glass of vodka in the shower. This is a miracle, you know. So lady that you're sitting out there, I want you to know that I'm very open about my recovery, and I'm grateful for my recovery. I only ask one thing in exchange for you ever mentioning my name or anything about sobriety. I would love it if you would promise me, lady, speak now to your little player and promise you will never put my name next to the name Alcoholics Anonymous. I have, for 23 years, been able to avoid my name being printed next to Alcoholics Anonymous. I honor our tradition. I'll tell you, to explain it to you, lady, the fact is we have a tradition that states we remain anonymous at the level of press, radio, film, whole deal, video, the whole deal. The reason for that is if little Paulie Williams goes out and gets drunk next Wednesday, and you've printed a story about me being an Alcoholics Anonymous, people go, well, I don't understand. I heard he's in that there AA. That, you know, found face down in his own vomit. My God, I know it's like, that there AA must not work. The fact is that AA works beautifully. It gave me my life back, and the only thing I will ask of you, if you can ever write about me, please do not mention Alcoholics Anonymous. End of speech. Actually, beginning of my story, but end of speech, because I just, you know, I'm sorry about Jay, and I'm glad about Jay. I'm glad that Jay lived almost 40 years of sobriety and touched the lives that he will never get to meet that he touched, because the people that he touched, the sobriety that he passed on was passed to other people who passed to other people, passed to other people. It's the amazing way this thing works. Absolutely, without a doubt. I don't know how many newcomers are here, but I got to tell you right now, if you've wanted to do an AA meeting for the first time, you found the largest family in the world, and you found something that is, for me, an instant feeling of safety. You know, you would just have Brandon ask me, they're sitting up there, you don't seem to be too nervous. I said, no, I got to tell you, even up here, and this is unique, you know, I got an ego. Of course I have an ego. Do I like to hear my own story? I don't know, you know, but I was 5'9" when I was drinking, and then you remove the character defects, and I'm 5'2", so, you know. But the fact is, even standing up here, I'm in the middle of the herd. Because what I have to do is tell my story about what Alcoholics Anonymous did for me, what it gave to me. The amazing life that it gave to me. And, you know, and I speak a lot. As I said, I spoke last Saturday in North Dakota, and I've been asked to speak at an AA meeting, the small stag meeting in Brooklyn, New York, on Monday night, and I'll be out there and I'll speak there because, and incidentally, you were not in for a great night because I have a really boring, I mean, I have a white bread and mayonnaise drunkalog. I never came out of a blackout with, you know, a Russian arms dealer, you know. Never came out of a blackout with Norman Mailer and a couple of hookers in a hotel in Paris, you know. I come out of a blackout in the boys department of Sears, you know. Trying on sweaters, you know, and all of it, you know. All of a sudden you come to, and there's this distorted reindeer in front of you, and you're like, oh my God, you know, trapped in yarn, you know, so. But I speak a lot, and I love Alcoholics Anonymous. If you get nothing else from me tonight, you're going to understand that I really, really love Alcoholics Anonymous. And I go to, my home group is Lucky 13. We meet right in the sand. We sit in a circle on the sand, and I'm not the healthiest little dude when I show up at my meetings. I will show up at an meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, you know, I just bring the sickest part of myself to it. My wife says you're the same way driving to church. There's some part of you that you just sort of unleash that little nasty little devil in you as you're on your way to a meeting or to church. There's something in there, and I'm like, get that walker out of my way. I'm a sober alcoholic going to a meeting there, you know. You know, but I'll show up at my meeting, and I sit down. We sit in a circle in the sand. You know, the dolphins going by. I mean, what a gorgeous setting. I'm sitting there clenching my teeth. The dolphins are our primary porpoises. We've decided, you know, Lucky 13. But I'll sit down at this meeting. I'll sit in a circle. Usually there's about 25 or 30 of us there. In the wintertime, it gets smaller. We'll get up to 50 people in the summertime because it's a little busier in the summer at Sunset Beach. But we'll sit in the circle, and I'll sit there, and the first woman will start sharing about her kid who can't get sober. And I'll be sitting there going, you can carry the message, you can't carry the alcoholic. And my little, you know, the rats are chewing on the wires, and I'm just, you know, moving all over the place. And it's like I was when I got sober. When I got sober, I had a big cocaine habit. So I looked like a parrot when I got here. You know, I was like, you know, happy, joyous, and free. Yeah, you know, so, you know, just, you know, a parrot in his cage, you know. And I'm that way when I show up in my home group. You know, I haven't been to a meeting in a couple of days. I'm a little full of self, and I'm kind of in a hurry, and she's talking about that again. And then he starts to share about something, and something happens that I cannot explain. I don't know why, but all of a sudden, I'm still. All of a sudden, I'm just in my body, and I'm just there. And I think it's because I feel safe. I mean, that's the essence of it. We'd raise our hand at the beginning of the meetings in California, say, I'm an alcoholic. Is there any other alcoholics present? I raise my hand, and I take the best breath of my day. It pulls the ribs away from the lungs, and I get this deep breath. And all of a sudden, little Paulie feels like he's home. The center of the herd. The center of the herd. Place where I could tell you that I don't know how to do something. That's the gift of this thing to me, is that I get to turn to somebody, 23 plus and a half years ago, I turned to somebody and said, I don't know what I'm doing, and you have to help me. Instead of, you can't save your ass and your face at the same time. Hello! That's the gift and the glory of this program, is that we get here, our ticket in is by being honest. My ticket in was being willing to turn to another human being and say that I needed help. So I'm sitting in the circle of my little home group. We're going around the circle, and we'll come to some guy. I'll call him Steve. And Steve says, it's good to be here. Good to be here. Got a little over 5 years, and, work's pretty good. The wife's, everything's okay with, and Steve gets quiet. And Steve's face changes. And Steve says, I can't do this anymore. And Steve says, I've got today, and I'm not sure about making it through today. Steve gets honest with us, and you can feel. I mean, when I tell this, when I talk about this, I can feel the energy in this room change. You can feel an essence of just this, what I believe is just pure love. You know, I mean, the crankiest, crustiest old timer and the mid-range crunky old little dude like me, all of a sudden is leaning forward and is totally engaged because this person, this Steve, was willing to be honest with me. He was willing to share some piece of his life that, you know, where do you go to find somebody that you don't even know who will lean forward and say, you know what, this is who I am, warts and all, this is who I am. And I don't know what to do, will you help me? And that's what got me here. And it's that emotion, that pure love, that safety, and, you know, finding this place where we could do, I could finally do that instead of, because I was fine. I mean, I was 49 years old when I got sober. I didn't have the best childhood, but I had the longest, you know. So, yeah. But finding that place where all of a sudden, I could, instead of being fine, instead of being the guy that had all the answers, or was trying to look like I had all the answers, for the first time in my life, I, like Steve, turned to somebody and said, I don't know what I'm doing. You have to help me. I'm scared to death. I don't want to die. And I think I'm going to die, like my dad did. You know, my dad died of this disease and all. I was raised. Incidentally, somebody asked if I wanted to stand on something so y'all could see me better. You don't need to see me better. Trust me. You know, it's just, you know, this is you know. And if I need to see you better, I'll stand on my big book. I've been standing on it in a lot of ways, metaphorically, for 23 years and all. But I was raised in a household where alcohol was the reward for a hard day's work. My dad was in construction. He was a 6-footer. I had two brothers, 6'2", 6'3". My dad was 6'2". A mild resentment. We're working. You know, I'm 73 years old. Eventually, it'll go away, I suppose, and all. But my dad was a builder. He built Boys Town in Omaha. He built hospitals and hangars, and you know. So we were always moving. I went to 9 different schools by the time I was in the 9th grade. I was always the littlest kid in school. I was always the new kid in school. I have a black belt in "Don't hit me," you know. But my dad was sentimental, and my dad would drink at night with his buddy Ike McShane, and they would drink way, way into the night, and he'd get me up in the middle of the night to sing Danny Boy for Ike McShane. Ike McShane hated me. I know he hated me. Ike McShane, sitting there with my dad, did not want to hear some gnome sing Danny Boy, and, you know, it's all... He wanted some more 7 at 7, and they'd talk about the damn job, you know, which is what he did all the time. It's like my dad would pour his drinks, and he'd say, look, we always argue, so there are 3 things we argue about. We're not going to talk about it tonight. We're not going to talk about politics, religion, or the goddamn job. Then he'd have 2 drinks, and then spend the rest of the night talking about politics, religion, and the goddamn. It was like again and again and again. But my dad was a sentimental drunk, and he'd get me up in the night to sing, and one particular night he got me up. We were living in Lucasville, Ohio, right where Ohio, West Virginia, and Kentucky come together. It's not a gorgeous spot. There's a prison there now, and a junkyard where our trailer was. We were living in this little trailer. My dad got me up about 4 in the morning, said, you know what, I'm very drunk. And he said, you know what, my son? We're going to see a professional baseball game. And professional got harder and harder to say as he drank, and we... You know. You drove through a blinding, you know, still dark out, a blinding, horrible rainstorm. I mean, again, I'm 73 years old. I was probably maybe 10 at the time, maybe 11. I can close my eyes and I can see the headlights of the car in the rain. I can see the car all over the road, left and right. My dad going, I'm going, don't watch me, Dad, watch the road is what I'm thinking. I don't say it, but that's what I'm thinking. I remember concentrating, thinking my concentration was going to keep the car on the road. That's interesting. The Al-Anons out there, you know, I got to tell you that, you know, what the things we do to you, and I did the exact same thing with my own children. With my son and my beautiful son, my beautiful daughter in the back seat of my car, having a drink just to make it from Santa Barbara to LA and back, Could not do it without a drink, could not do it without a toot. Pass it on, I did the exact same thing. But my dad is looking at me and I'm thinking my concentration is keeping the car on the road. It occurs to me that may have been the headwaters of my grandiosity. I mean, think about it. When you're a little boy and it's too terrifying to think about the fact that you're about to die, you imbue yourself with powers that are unhealthy to think you have those kind of powers. But I think it's a part of my alcoholism that took hold before I drank. I think I acted like an alcoholic before I drank like one. I think I acted like an alcoholic before I drank like one. My dad was driving through, he says, we're going to see the Cleveland Indians play baseball, my boy. Cleveland Indians, professional baseball. Going to see the Cleveland Indians play baseball. And he drove to Cincinnati. Drove to the wrong city, exactly, yeah, you know. Cleveland Indians don't play in Cincinnati. So he gets to the ballpark, and the ballpark's empty. We're the only car sitting out there in the parking lot. He says, whoa, early, we're going to get really good seats, you know. And he sits there for a while, and he sits there for a while, and he finally gets up and he walks in and he looks, you know, checks the schedule at the box office, whatever you call it, all those little rows of windows. And I can see what I call the alcoholic slump. I mean, I did it for years. I've got a master's in the alcoholic slump when he realized what he'd done. You know, I can close my eyes and I can see him. He was wearing brown suit pants, what we now call a wife beater, which is a sleeveless T-shirt and slippers to the ball game. Dad didn't put shoes on to go to the ball game. He kind of forgot that, you know. But his shoulders, you know, he looked like Lincoln. He was, you know, like my dad looked like Lincoln. You don't tell me that God doesn't have a sense of humor. You know? but he's watching and he kind of does that slump, and he realizes what he's done, and it's sort of that, you know, well, I did it again. You know, you try to do something right for the world, and you get screwed again. Is kind of that's, you know. And he came back, and he got in the car, and he looked at Ike McShane, and Ike realized what they'd done, and they had that kind of moment. And he turned to me and he said something I lived by for 49 years. He said, there's not going to be a ball game, my son, but it's the thought that counts. It's the thought that counts. And I went, I got that. I can do that. Yeah, this is a way I can live my life like that, you know. For 49 years, I was the thoughtiest little bastard you ever met. I mean, I just, you know, I thought, and in my thinking, I had great, grandiose, wonderful, wonderful plans of philanthropy, dedication, you know, opinions about things, opinions about things I knew nothing about. I had definite opinions about who you should vote for. I didn't vote until I got sober. For 49 years, I was all about it was the thought that counted until I found the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, and you taught me two things. First of all, I went from the thought, it's not the thought that counts, then it must be the feelings, which concerns me because I don't think I'm ever going to get in touch with my feelings again. And my sponsor, his name was Jerry Hunter, who passed away a few years ago with 37 years, said, don't you worry, Paulie, if you stay sober long enough, your feelings will get in touch with you. Which is old AA. What you taught me is that it's my actions that count. What you taught me is that it's not my thought, the thought, it's not the feelings even, because the feelings will come and go, you know. Process them, feel them, but don't totally act on them, because your actions are what matters. And I have to tell you, for the last 23 years, I've acted differently, and it's been a slow process, but it's been the most amazing trip of my life. As I told you, my dad died in it. My dad drove his car into the abutment of a bridge in Scioto County, Ohio, when I was 13. And and he died of our disease. And yet was he an alcoholic? It's funny because for me, being an alcoholic is a proclamation. It's kind of like being a poet, you know. It's like, I don't know, I'm a poet, I'm an alcoholic. It's just, there's the power in it it's the opposite of being a poet. You're a poet when somebody else says that's a poet. You're an alcoholic when you say I'm an alcoholic. That would have been a great, powerful statement for him. I'm a songwriter. I've made my living my entire life with words. There are no words that I've ever found that are more powerful and more potent than the words, my name is Paul, and I'm an alcoholic. When my dad died, I was shipped off to live with an aunt and uncle in Long Beach, California, where everybody was 6 feet tall, everybody had a great tan. What color I have, I got from the light in my refrigerator. You know? Everybody hit puberty at 9 in Long Beach, California, and I had a really slow body clock. They had given me shots to make me grow when I was about 8, and all it did is it kicked me into early puberty, which instead of making me grow, closed off the bones, so I wasn't going to grow. It also made me horny for about 5 months when I was 8, you know. And, you know. You know. Very confused, you know, a lot of, if you know, ripe for analysis, you bet. A little time on the couch, you know, yeah, it probably helped me understand things. Didn't help me quit drinking. You helped me quit drinking. This deal helped me quit drinking. Helped me live my life better, maybe a little bit. Made my life better for the people around me. You did that. You did that. I wish my dad had found that, you know. I will tell you that the one time that I really felt like I belonged with these kids, you know, and again, incidentally, after that 6 months of puberty when I was about 8 and everything, they got me off the shots. They said, well, we don't want that. We don't want little Paul trying to look down Aunt Bessie's, you know, blouse. Let's, you know, back off with the shots. They backed off with the shots, and then my body clock was really slow. I mean, so I didn't hit puberty till after high school. This is not a great way to go through high school. To go to the showers when you haven't hit puberty yet in high school is like, my first prayer was, God, I don't care how big you make me, just cover me with fur, you know? Typical AA pitch, isn't it? Yeah. Be careful what you pray for. It's right. I have hair that I don't need hair right now. I'm 73. The tops of my ears don't really get cold, but the stuff I've got an antenna on the side of my nose that sprouts overnight. It's just, you know, that demands to be plucked, or I'll put somebody's eye out if they hug me. You know, it's just, you know, a little piece of wire sticking out of the side of my face. You know. But when I drank with my buddies, there is that, you know, ritual. Joseph Campbell talks about the power of ritual. We have great rituals. We read the chapter 5 at every meeting in life. So there's things that we do that are ritual, our inventory, our amends, you know. But so the ritual of drinking with my buddies was the first kind of sense of, let's get drunk, throw it, and be somebody. I felt like I belonged. There was something there. I don't know when I crossed the line from use to abuse to addiction. I'll say it again. I don't know when I crossed the line from use to abuse to addiction, but I'd be willing to bet there were people that were living with me that could probably tell you. It was right about in here. Because I had an interesting time, you know, when the child of the 60s, I was born in 1940, so in the 60s I was in my 20s. 70s, I had amazing success. And as I mentioned before, I became a songwriter. You know, I think something clicked in when I was 8. I went, yeah, ladies, you can keep the basketball. These are breasts. I'm going to write songs. You know, I just, you know. And I wrote for 50 years, I wrote love songs. And, I wrote basically codependent anthems, you know. You know? Yeah. Pick me up and love me, you know, ouch mommy songs, you know, come on, put your arms around me, I'll feel better, you know. You might like it too, but mainly I'll feel better, you know. It's what I wrote about, and I just, you know, and I think that a lot of people, you know, the thing is I wasn't hip enough to be clever. I just wrote what I actually felt and other people felt it too, and I had a lot of success. And, you know, you would have thought that with the success I was having that I would have been living in gratitude and trust, which is the two rails that my choo-choo runs on. I was on a TV show and it said to me, you got a choo-choo? I went, yeah, I got a choo-choo. My choo-choo runs on gratitude and trust. Gratitude and trust. You'd think that based on the life that I had in the 70s, the success that I had, because I had a lot of success. And I won the awards that you want to win, and I got the star on Hollywood Boulevard, and I did all that nonsense and everything. And what I gave back for all of that is just I became a chronic and habitual liar and a drunk. I became a chronic and habitual liar and a drunk. I would promise you to have something done by a certain date, and then I'd tell you I had dental work and I couldn't make the appointment. Had a lot of dental work done when I was drinking, you know. Slowly but surely, you know, no matter how good things were going for me, there was part of me that I think at some level just felt like I was an imposter, that I didn't belong there, that I was this little kid, that, you know, that I was trailer trash, and I didn't belong sitting in the room with the people I was sitting in the room with. But what you got out of my mouth and what you got out of my attitude, the way that I treated people was the opposite of that. The way I treated it was like, hey, I'm on top of it here. I'm on top of it here. I was not on top of it here. I was dying of alcoholism. I had no idea that I was an alcoholic, and I never would have said I was. I thought everybody had a glass of vodka in the shower in the morning. I absolutely started my day that way again and again and again. That's how things would calm down enough to eat a meal, you know. I was never going to be an alcoholic until somebody that I really loved told me I was. And what happened is I had two beautiful children, small children, and a wife who was a tolerant, wonderful wife, you know, and I left my wife and my kids for a 22-year-old psych major who said to me, I love you too much to watch you die. I'm going to leave you because you're an alcoholic. And I went, wait a minute, oh, this is amazing. I was just thinking of going to rehab. It's so yeah, of course, because I couldn't live without her. And I mean, I have a God-shaped hole in the center of my chest. I have a God-shaped hole in the center of my chest, and I've tried to fill it with alcohol and with cocaine and with career and with drugs and with ladies and drugs and alcohol and all that stuff, and it doesn't work. What works is God. What works, what fits is God. What fits is the big amigo. I call him the big amigo, you know. The rats get to chewing on the wires, and there's only one thing I know that will actually calm them down, and that's the big amigo. Turn to God, you know. Well, anyway, this young lady said, you're an alcoholic, I'm going to leave you. I said, I'm going to go to rehab. I went to a place called Shadle in Santa Barbara, which is aversion therapy. Has anybody in the room had aversion therapy? Oh, man, this is a room full of lucky people. I'm going to tell you, oh, my God, let me tell you about aversion therapy. What they do in aversion therapy is they give you an injection to make you sick, you know, really just horribly. I think I'm going to die sick. And when you first start coming on to the drug that they inject you with, you kind of start feeling warm, and it's kind of an odd feeling and everything. And they take you in a room, and they say, we're going to let you drink whatever you want. As a matter of fact, we're going to insist that you drink every kind of booze, especially your favorites. And you take you in a room with a chair with a bowl on it. You go, what's the bowl for? They say, you'll find out, you know. Blah, blah, blah. 3 hours. Blah, blah, blah. Keep drinking, keep throwing up, keep drinking, keep throwing up. And then I'm sorry to be so graphic, but this is what they do. They take a towel, put it in the stuff that came out of you, wrap it around your neck, put you in a room for a couple hours, and let you think about whether or not you want to drink the next day. It's aversion therapy. Next day, they give you an injection of sodium pentothal, which is the truth serum. And they ask you while you're under if you want to drink. And if you say yes, then you go back for more beer, you know. They said, Mr. Williams, we're very worried about you. I said, why is that? They said, you're always early for the sodium pentothal. Yes. I don't know how to do life. I don't know how to do this stuff. You give me that shot, and it's like you count backwards. You know, remember there was a great Honeymooners where Art Carney was given the truth serum, and he said, this will never work. 100, 99, 98, 3. I loved it, 109. My band on the road, if I was really messed up, they'd look at each other and go, 3. That was their code for, you know, from that episode. But by God, it worked for 7 months. I didn't have a program. I didn't have a sponsor. I didn't have a fellowship. You know, I had no principles to live by. I had no steps to guide me through the process of changing my life into a livable life. I had none of that. But by God, I had aversion to alcohol. And for 7 months, I did not drink or use. And I was just a charming guy to be around. I was just, you know. And it was just, you know, and I was living with this little girl, and I'm going, like, you're happy now, aren't you? Like, I'm happy. Hope you're happy because I'm happy. Aren't we just doing great, aren't we, you know? So 7 months into this whole deal, I went to Jamaica, Ocho Rios, Jamaica, to work on a project. And I got to tell you, my ego was alive and well and kicking me and going, it's time to write a hit, it's time to write a hit. And I stayed up really, really late at night, and I wrote something with my little recorder, and I sang it into it. I took my place beside you. Oh, man. I wrote something really special, and I went, God, that sounds like a hit. That sounds like a hit. And I went to sleep, and I got up, wandered around a little bit, and I sat down. It was about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and I listened to what I'd done the night before, and I thought, this is going to be good. And I listened to it. I took my place beside you, girl, and I realized I had rewritten "O Little Town of Bethlehem." I took my place beside you, girl. Oh, Jesus. I mean, Jesus, Jesus, Don't want to steal from the Big Amigo, One of his favorites, you don't want to rewrite that, And at that exact moment, sitting out by this pool in Ocho Rios, a butler, because this was the home of a very wealthy songwriter as well, and this butler came by with a tray and some ice and clean glasses and rum and everything. He said, "Excuse me, Mr. Williams, would you care for something to drink? Perhaps a rum and Coke?" And I went, "Thank you, yes." I mean, I don't think he even got to the K and Coke before I said yes. Yeah. I'm Paul Williams. I have discipline. I have willpower. I'm 5'2", and I made it into this world, and I'm in show business, and I'm doing great, and blah, 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 blah. I can have one rum and Coke. 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I had one rum and Coke. At 2 o'clock in the morning, I was at Bob Marley's grave explaining reggae to a lot of black people I didn't know. Because you add alcohol, and of course by then I had found cocaine, and I become a chronic and habitual liar. A chronic and habitual liar. For God's sakes, what is it about me? What piece of me? And I hear this again and again and again in the rooms. You hear it again and again and again from other alcoholics. That what is it in us that why do I what is it that when you add alcohol, I begin acting like a big shot, but I'm lying because I obviously don't feel that who I am and what I know is enough. So I'm recreating who I am to the person across from me, so I'll be the person that I'll be sort of looking good, and what is it, ego? What is it, what the hell is going on? What part of me is not able to just be who I am and have that be enough? You add booze and I start lying. Turns out I'm not a pilot. I landed a plane. I am not a pilot. That's how good a liar I am about it. I mean, I just, sitting next to a guy named Barrett Duff, who was a pilot. We had a Cessna 310. And I, spent enough time in the cockpit with him and everything like that, and said I'd had some earlier lessons, and blah, 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 and I took some Citabria time. I actually landed a 310. And I looked at him and I went, I'm pretty good, aren't I? And he said, yeah, that was the most frightening landing of my life, Why do I lie when you put alcohol in my system? What part of me isn't quite good enough, Why did I have to come here and tell you all the things that are wrong with me to feel like I finally measured up? It's just an absolute glorious mystery. I went back to Los Angeles, and where I was living with the little psych major, and I lied through my teeth. She said, "I know you're drinking and you're using. Let's get you some help." And I went, "You've got a lot of issues with men, don't you? What the hell is wrong with you? What did your father do to you? Oh, God, forgive me, because I made her doubt herself." I mean, that's what we do. And to the Al-Anons, I give you, at this moment, I take a moment to make a deep personal amends to all Al-Anons in this moment, and say that the damage that we do, and the damage I did by making her doubt her own instincts can be irreparable damage. To love somebody enough to have started a life with them, and have that person turn to you and say, "You know what? There's something wrong with you, because you think I'm loaded and I'm not, and you need to examine yourself, because there's something wrong with you." And when we rise up in our disease and we've got our medicine and we're fighting to keep our medicine, we will say things to you with such a passion and such a clarity that you will doubt yourself. And for that, I am terribly, terribly sorry. And I speak whenever I'm asked to, and one of the reasons I speak is because I get a chance to say to the Al-Anons in the room that I know what I did, and I would be willing to bet that the alcoholic in your life knows what he did. And we're doing our best to put our lives back together because we've been given this amazing gift. Thank you for your tolerance and your patience. This little girl left. I mean, she'd go to bed convinced that there was something wrong with her, and there was nothing wrong with her. I would then sneak out the puppy door to score more booze and drugs. We had, well, there was a very sensible reason for it. We had a really squeaky front door, and like when you've been up like 2 days and nights, it's like, God, I mean, it just, the sounds are all distorted and weird and everything. So I didn't want to wake her, so out of respect to her, I would crawl out the puppy door. I had 2 huskies who would look at me like, yeah. In husky, they would say, he's screwed up again, She left, and I was left to my own devices, and my own devices meant that I kept getting drunker and drunker. And what eventually happened is I went to Oklahoma City to play a gig, and I had a full tilt psychotic episode. I was walking. There was a knock on the door in the hotel room. I opened the door. The promoter of the gig was there. I started walking down the hall with him, headed for an afternoon gig in Oklahoma City. And the way he described it later is he said, it looked as if somebody, an invisible creature, grabbed you and threw you higher than your own head against the wall. You were just, for about 45 minutes, I was tortured by a monster that only I could see. I was thrown down what I thought were escalator stairs. I found out later there was no escalator in the building. It was moving stairs to me. I was bitten on the neck. My ears were twisted by a little monster that I could see that nobody else could see. It looked like a small, monstrous version of myself. It looked like me as a little boy. It was terrifying. It lasted about 45 minutes. We canceled the gig. I did it the next day, and I told the audience that I'd had a reaction to my meds, which was the truth. You bet it was the truth, because I didn't know how to live. They'd taken away my alcohol and with this aversion technique and given me nothing in its place. I didn't know how to live. I don't know what I'm doing. So these were my meds. I need these. I don't know how to deal with these people. I don't know what to do. They want me to get up and sing this stuff that I write to them, and I don't know how to do it. I'm scared to death. No. What comes out of me is blah, blah, blah. So what happened is I had this full tilt episode. I went back to LA, and I continued to drink. And about 2 weeks later, in a blackout, and this is especially later is the best part of my story. In a blackout, I called a doctor, and I said, I need to get sober. Will you find a place for me? And he called me the next day. He said, I found a place for you. I said, found a place for what? Found a place for you to get sober. Why would you think I'd want to get sober? Because you called me yesterday and said so. And I went, somebody's been using my body again, And then I had that moment of clarity. It's so wonderful. I'm sitting here looking at a picture of Jay, and the smile of Jay in this picture is exactly, it's exactly what I need to see at this moment, because it was just an absolute gift that I had that moment of, I went, let's do it. And I went to a place called New Beginnings, and I found you. I called a guy named Jerry Hunter, and I asked him to be my sponsor. He was my temporary sponsor until he died about 10 years ago. And it was a temporary sponsor. It was great. And he called me in rehab, and he said, how you treating the world today, Paulie? I said, excuse me, momentito, you've had a slip of the tongue. Don't you mean, how's the world treating me? He said, don't give a rat's ass how the world's treating you. I said, you don't? He said, well, actually I do, because I love you, Paulie. But he said, the fact is, I can't really do anything about how the world's treating you, but I'll promise you something. If you are vigilant, if you are spiritually vigilant and monitor the way you treat the rest of the world, everything in your life will get better. If you are careful about, and he led me to a sentence that I believe is the most important sentence in the big book. The spiritual life is not a theory. We have to live it. And I think the spiritual life is not a theory, we have to live it, is the most important sentence for me in the big book. And I think what that means is it's not about my capacity to pray, it is my capacity to end my prayer with the thought and the prayer of the highest good of all concerned. This or that I ask for, or something better to the highest good of all concerned. I loved being sober. I loved, actually the beginnings in rehab, I had a kind of a blinding little moment where I got scared. I didn't know the expression, I want what you've got, but all of a sudden I went, okay, I'm not gonna get it. I had that, oh Jesus, now I want it and now I don't think I'm gonna get it. And I prayed for the first time in my life about my recovery. And I said, and I was mad. I was angry. I was, it's like there was no quiet joy in it. I screamed that these people are getting sober and they know something I don't know, and there's something I haven't seen yet, and you have to show me. There's something I don't know, and I need to, I need to know something that I haven't learned yet, because I can't do this anymore. I don't want to drive drunk with my kids in the car. I don't want to be at the liquor store at 6:30, thinking about robbing the place if they don't open it pretty soon. I can't do this anymore. And I grabbed what I thought was a piece of blank paper to write my first step, because we were going to write a first step that day. And I noticed something printed on the other side of the piece of paper, and I turned it over, and for the first time in my life, I read the words, God, I offer myself to thee, to build with me and to do with me as thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do thy will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help of thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. That third step prayer, that line, bondage of self, was like a key for me. And I'll tell you exactly how it worked. When I saw the bondage of self, I realized that I had taken myself, or been taken prisoner, by drinking and using, that I had stopped growing. And boy, what a perfect metaphor for that. I had stopped growing. Because growth comes from the ability to say you don't know. It's back to that earlier thought. The bondage of self is the part of me that wants to know the answer. It's exhausting. It's exhausting explaining things you know nothing about. No wonder I was tired. No wonder I was tired. The bondage of self, the need to know it all, and to this day, if somebody asks me if I know somebody, if I don't know them, my head is already going up and down like, yeah, and then I'll go, because I want them to get on with the story, or do I want them to think, yeah, I'm supposed to know this person, so I'm going to pretend like I do? None of this is going through my mind, but what should be going like this is going like this. If you ask me how a jet engine operates, I'll be about 3 sentences into it explaining it until I realize, you know nothing about jet engines. Just shut up, And that's recovery. That's spiritual growth for me. That's a much better Polly. I love Jerry Hunter. Jerry Hunter was this little guy, and he'd go back and forth on his motorcycle. He had a full dress Harley, and I was, as I told you, I was like a Mr. Parrot here. He'd be talking to me, and he'd put his hands out. He said, "Let's just try to dance a little. Let's get this in sync and all." I loved Jerry, and I loved Alcoholics Anonymous, and I did something that probably no other alcoholic ever did. I went to UCLA and got my certification as a drug and alcohol counselor. Ta-da! Come touch the hem, and I will strike you sober. I mean, I entered into what I refer to as the Polly Lama period of my life. Let me just stand up in front of large groups and just heal them all at once. Raging ego, and but I also loved it. I just loved it. And I'd go in and I'd work in the hospital. I worked for a group called MAP, which is a musicians assistance program. Musicians are over medicated and underinsured. So MAP helps them get and I began the process. My sobriety date was incredible. I had my last drink September 21st, 1989. My sobriety date is March 15th, 1990. And the reason that my sobriety date changed is because March 14th, 1990, I always remember the date, I took a Valium that was prescribed for my girlfriend. So it was practically my Valium. And for like 4 years, I was like, I remember the date and I would argue with myself. You know what? No, it's not a slip. I'm an alcoholic. I didn't do Valium. I took a Valium. I had a headache. I had a big job the next day. It was her Valium. I mean, at one point, I had been prescribed Valium years before. I could have still had it around, blah, 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 blah. And then I realized one day that I had never told Jerry. And at that moment, it became a slip. At that exact moment. When I got far enough away from the incident, you know, it's like you watch the moon coming up. When the moon's coming up through all the haze, it's really big and distorted and everything, and then it gets high enough out of the atmosphere, and it's the size that it's supposed to be in your vision or whatever. There's something about me and incidents in my life, especially with amends. There are people that I've made amends to that I looked at the moment that I got sober, and at a year, and at 2 years, and at 3 years, and went, her evil, me angelic. Devil, angel, never making amends, never happen, won't happen, don't need to make that amends. This is somebody I do not need to make an amends to. And then there's this little place right between sleep and wake where God delivers mail. It's like a little mail slot. And I'll be almost asleep, and then I'll go, oh, Jesus, I did what? Oh, man, I never thought of it like that. And the next morning I pick up, there was one woman in particular. I knew I'd never have to make an amends to her, you know. But I picked up the phone, and she was very kind. She said, I understand the process. I appreciate what you're doing. It took that long for me to get that much distance between me and my ego in the moment. It took God's intervention at a moment late at night when I was undefended, where I could see what I'd done, something that I had been blocking from my memory that really made it really clear, as with Jerry, that I hadn't told Jerry about this. That's when it became a slip, and at that moment I knew what to do. At that moment I picked up the phone and I called him, you know. And it was a great phone call because I called Jerry. It was like 4 years after the fact. I was like, you know, Jerry, I need to change my date. He went, oh my God, oh my God, well, okay, all right. And you know, you could just, and I mean, I could see him. I was on the phone, but I could see him. He's like, oh, man. All right. What did you do? I took a Valium. I took one of Judy B's Valiums. You know, all right. Well, we start again. When did you take it? I said, March 14th, 1990. And he said, well, that's a hell of a 10th step. Promptly admitted when we were wrong. That's really, you know, it's good, you know. And it was promptly. It was as soon as I realized it was a slip, I called Jerry like that, you know. I mean, I'm willing to grow. I don't do it as quick as everybody else, you know. God bless him. God bless Jerry. You know, his whole thing was about how you treat the rest of the world. That was his whole thing. He always had a newcomer on the back of that bike. You know, it's like you were talking about Jay. That Jay would pick you up at 8 in the morning and drive you around all day to go to a meeting. I'm telling you a story from the podium. I knew you'd appreciate it. But, you know, again, Jerry, Jay, people that, you know, you'll never be able to track down all the good they did, all the people, all the lives that they touched. You know, eventually I decided that, you know, that I, you know, I mean, I still love AA. I still love my recovery. I love this process. I travel. I work for an organization in music that I travel a lot for. Every year I go to Ireland. Talk about, I mean, Ireland, the headwaters of our disease. My God, I mean, I am just the worst over there. I'm pulling people off of bar stools over there going, I can help you, but we don't want your help. You get away from us. You know? People, I go over there, people grab me, they go, where'd you hide the gold, you little bastard? You know? Dalai Lama, saving the world. And I felt very disconnected from music, and then I went to Nashville and met a guy there. And it's funny, I tell this story about going to there's a guy that is a wonderful songwriter, and I wanted to write with him, and I hadn't written in the same room with another human being. You know, I hadn't done that. I'd written songs for a Muppet movie, and the Muppet Christmas Carol I did, and some other stuff all by myself, but I never shared that experience where I sat down in a room and I wrote a song with a guy. And I went to Nashville on something else, and at about 7 years sober, and as my hotel room, I made an appointment to write with this one guy, and I hit my knees in the bathroom, prayed about it. I said, God, we're going to write a song today. It'd be wonderful if you'd show up, with an idea. And went to the guy's house, and 10 o'clock in the morning, I go to his house. He's got a really nice little house with one of those ornately carved doors with a little door in it, you can see out. So I rang his doorbell. He came to the door. He opened that little window. There wasn't anybody there, so he left, I pounded on his door, and he came back, and he after a while he came back and he opened up the door, and he was 6'4". Why are they all 6'4"? 6'4", full big black beard. This guy's name is John. He's from Minnesota, so he only smiles when he has to. He just I go into his house and I go, this is a really bad idea. All of a sudden my confidence is gone. I've got nothing to write about. This makes no sense at all. This was an awful mistake. Can I use your bathroom? I said to him. I wanted to go. I wasn't going to bail. I was going to stay and do it, but I needed to talk to God one more time before I did. So I went into his bathroom, and I hit my knees in his bathroom. And as I'm on my knees in his bathroom, I look up at his mirror, and reflected over my head, backwards, is the Serenity Prayer. There's a couple things in my story I love telling. This is a good one. So I go back and I went, Serenity Prayer, are you? He went, oh, yeah. I went, well, me too. He said, oh, I know. And I was like, Mommy, pick me up and love me. We are home, It's just, yeah. Because it's that safety thing. It's that center of the herd. I'm okay. If I hear it from a taxi driver, it says, like easy does it. You go, easy does it. Oh my God, are you? And yeah, it's just the best feeling. And so I sit there with John, and we start talking about how we got sober. And we wrote a song called "You're Gone" that day for Diamond Rio, because we both had some young lady that said bye until we straighten your ass out. So I started writing songs again, and I started going to Nashville fairly regularly. And the best part of my story is the part that I will leave you with. When I was 10 years sober, I went to Nashville. And while I was there, I was asked to go and speak at the jail. And H&I is fabulous. It's an amazing thing to go in there and find some decent recovery, behind bars. And then when you hear that door clang behind you, you go, thank you, God, for letting me out of there tonight, because if I'd spent the night, I'd be in high heels by tomorrow morning. I know that, You just don't want to feel a man picking you up and hear the word next, It's just not something I want to experience in this lifetime, But anyway, I went and I spoke, and it was great. It was a great experience, and I'm just full of self. I'm like, I have taken the message, to the prisoners. I've met them on the road to Damascus. This is, whatever. Just Paulie this, Paulie that. So I go back to my hotel room, and I have to fight through this lobby with badges on, and it's like 3 nights in a row. This is like Sunday night. This is like there's Saturday night. There have been like 3 nights in a row that there have been guys there with badges on, and I get an elevator like that. So I go up to my room, and I'm feeling fantastic and full. It's sort of this magical combination of Jiminy Cricket and Gandhi, And I go and I take my little magnetic key to my room, and my hotel room key doesn't work again the 3rd night. And it's a quick trip from Gandhi to Himmler for me. I'm just like, down I go back and wait for the elevator, back down into the lobby, go through all the guys with the badges and everything, go up, but I've learned restraint of pen and tongue in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. So I walk up to the guy and I go, I know it's not your fault, but this is the 3rd night that I've had to come down and go through all the badges. And I'm not sure why in the world the good Lord would want me to be down here, at which point there was a tap on my shoulder. And I turned around, and there was a guy there with a badge. He said, I don't mean to bother you. I just wanted to say hi. My name is Gary. I booked you in Oklahoma City years ago. And I went, oh, my God, Oklahoma City. Are you the guy when I did my Linda Blair, lick me, your mother, that one, yeah. Was that you? And he said, yeah, that was me. It was Gary from Oklahoma City. And I said, well, I just spoke with the jail, and I'm 10 years sober, and blah, 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 this, and I went UCLA certification, blah, 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 me. And he said, yeah, I heard in the rooms you were sober too, you know. And I went, wow, and I thought, this guy just met me, and I turned him into an alcoholic, just, osmosis, you know. I heard in the rooms that you were sober too. I said, you're a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. And he reached in his pocket and he pulled out a chip for 17 years. And I did the math. And I went, you were 7 years sober when that happened. And he said, yes, sir. I said, wow. Well, first of all, I need to make amends to you about, you know. He said, oh, I understood, you know, we understood. I said, what was it like? And he said, oh, Paul, he calls me Paulie now because we're friends, we golf. And he said, Paul, you were dying. I've never been so scared. He said, it was like I took you back over to the venue. Your band tried to calm you down, and it was just, we thought you were dying. We absolutely thought you were dying. I said, what'd you do? He said, I called my sponsor. I went, yeah. I said, what'd your sponsor tell you to do? He said, oh, well, I'll tell you what we did on the spot. We got together a prayer circle for you in Oklahoma City. And a bunch of drunks in Oklahoma City prayed that you'd get sober. If you've been listening, you know that about 2 weeks later or less, in a blackout, I called a doctor and said I wanted to get sober. When we put our hands together at the end of a meeting and have a moment of silence for the alcoholic suffering in and out of the rooms, you're tapping into the most amazing power you will ever experience in your life, and it saved mine. And for 23 years, if anybody asked how I was doing, I would always say, it's all a gift. And my wife always said to me, I'm going to put it on your headstone. Paul, it's all a gift, Williams, But the fact is, on some level, I didn't believe it until I saw Gary again. On some level, I went, you know what, I show up, I get on the plane, I speak when they ask me to speak. I've sponsored a bunch of guys through the years. I've chaired meetings. I've been secretary at regular meetings in AA and CA, and some piece in the back of my ego or in the back of my dark little corner of my heart or my busy brain believed that I had earned this deal. And the fact is that when Gary said to me, we did a prayer circle for you. That's the most elegant part of my story. It's one of these days I'll tell that story, my story, and that won't touch me, but it's not happening tonight. There is to this, I wrote a blog about Jim Henson. I worked with Jim Henson a lot, and I have a website called Gratitude and Trust, and I wrote a blog about Jim Henson called The Elegance of Kindness, and what I've experienced in AA is the elegance of kindness. The elegance of kindness. Anywhere I go in the world, I can find somebody who cares about me, who knows me, people that I care about and that I know. I mean, I'm sitting in this room, I could randomly pick out 5 of you, put 6 of us in a car comfortable for 4, drive to Nashville, and by the time we're out of the county, we'll be feeling like family, And I'm the most arrogant, elitist little bastard you've ever met. Well, how do you get me, somebody at 49, pick them up and in this suit of ego armor and have them come to a place where they know that the greatest gift that they've been given is that they can go anywhere in the world and find a bunch of old drunks to hang out with and learn about life. How in the world do you explain that? The way you explain it is you say that this book, which was written 5 years before I was born, is the most elegant guide to living I have ever encountered. I wish everybody could have a little taste of this. And they can. If you're new, they can. And you can be the walking version of this. You can be the walking version of this. God. So that's my story. You know, I'm wonderful, and and you're okay, and Gary and I are great friends. We do play golf, and you know, and I continue to do the work, and it's you know, it's an amazing process and all. My life, you know, Earl H., when he got sober, with his sponsor said, you know, you're such a mess, you can't even handle the Serenity Prayer. So when you get up in the morning, I want you to just look at the heavens and go, whatever. And at the end of the day, get on your knees and look at the heavens and go, enough, you know. I live my life by 3 prayers. I get up in the morning and I say, surprise me, God. Surprise me, God. It implies complete trust. Complete trust. I give you the reins of my life. There's no way in the world that I could ever get high enough to see into the future. But I know, you know, I live in gratitude and trust. I'm grateful for the life that I've had. I trust that everything I need is right here and now and will be as this now moves forward in my life. Surprise me, God. If we do this one day at a time, every day is our birthday. Surprise me, God. My second prayer is lead me where you need me. Now that sounds like, oh, there's a man who set out to be a gift to the world. Nonsense. Lead me where you need me. If I'm someplace that I'm needed, I don't feel like I'm in the way. It is my natural state, someplace way back in here, to feel like I'm in the way. But if I am led where I can be a little bit useful, I take this feeling of being useful, and it works. I don't know. It's a great stain remover. This sense of being useful is something that I don't have to then go out and fight for anything in my day. If I'm useful, then I get quiet, and I'm comfortable. And if I'm comfortable, I listen. When I listen, I learn. I'm 73 years old, and I'm kind of beginning to get this student thing. And part of it is we get this quiet enough to hear this, you know. We get this quiet enough to remember people like this, the Jerry Hunters, you know, the J. Plumbacks. At the end of my day, I say, thank you, Father. You know, when I met my wife is a Swedish and Mexican. She's a little Swedican, you know. She has 2 Swedish relatives who live 800 miles away. She has 208 Mexican relatives that live in my backyard. When I met Mariana, she loves AA. She's not a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. She is a member, sort of a member of the you know, the Sisters of Revenge. She's a good, you know, it's a little, you know. But when I met, I walked into, and she, my little sweetie is me. I wear 3 symbols. I wear a wedding ring because the stud muffin is taken, you know. I wear a cross around my neck because I got baptized after I got sober. And I wear this little thing in my, I had an earring put in, you know, I snuck out of rehab and had him pierce my ear and had him do a little circle and a triangle, and I've worn it for 23 of the best years of my life at all. My little sweetie, when I met her, I went into her house the first time, and she had something on her mantle that she had framed, and I looked at it, and I knew that we were going to just be fine together because she'd cut the front of a card and framed it and put it on. And what it says, it's an anonymous saying. It says, care deeply, give freely, think kindly, act gently, and be at peace with the world. Care deeply, give freely, think kindly, act gently, and be at peace with the world. It's the essence of what I've been given in Alcoholics Anonymous. Thank you for giving me my life back. I'll keep coming back.
I think we got a great talk going on here. Thanks for watching the channel. Taper Dave here. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control. Up and down, right and left. Powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with. And it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst and one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, oop, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right. But I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.